There we go. Because we are streaming, I assume, correct? Okay. So I'll call the meeting to order at 5 o'clock on October 4th for MPC. And look at our agenda and say, first item up on the agenda would be the adoption of the agenda itself. Any changes or omissions? No? Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Chair Gullickson. I see no changes or additions or of the agenda, so I just move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. All those in favor? Approved. And then the next item is the adoption of the minutes from the July 5th meeting. We had a chance to review them. Yes, Member Lentz.
I moved the agenda as presented from the last meeting.
Thank you very much. Any objections to that? Or adoption of minutes, sorry. You did say.
Oh, adoption of minutes, sorry.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Any objections to that motion? Nope, perfect. All those in favor? Approved. Okay, we'll move on to our one item on the agenda here, the development permit. And who's presenting?
That would be me.
Yeah, Manager, is it not manager, is it?
Planner.
Planner McLaughlin, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And go ahead.
We just saw a car pull in, so Ms. Kirk is just checking to see if that's our applicant, but we can still present the application to you. So the application before you today is a development permit for the discretionary use of a daycare facility at 4013 53rd Avenue. The property is zoned I1, which typically provides an area for light industrial or other service-related industrial activities. And so the site is unique because on April 11th, Council did pass a site exception as a land use bylaw amendment to allow a daycare facility as a discretionary use on the site. And we are supporting the application, but we do have a number of conditions that we're recommending as part of the approval. So what you're considering today is the permitted use of a 2.44 meter high fence, which is 8 feet. A fence under 6 feet does not require a permit, but over 6 feet it would. So that's part of the application. There's a variance to the minimum parking requirement, and the variance being 3 stalls. And then the discretionary use of the daycare facility. So a few things that you're considering. We did do a 60-meter circulation to all property owners. So there were 7 different property owners within that 60 meters, and we did not receive any responses from them in regards to this application. And so what the applicant is proposing is a daycare facility, which would operate Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The applicant expects the maximum capacity to be 153 children and 26 staff. However, we did confirm with them that 153 would not be on site every single day. They had estimated that it would be approximately 100 daily for the site. And the letter of intent is on the presentation, but it's also included in your agenda package and is basically just summarizing that it will be a daycare facility with an outdoor play area with that 153 and their hours of operation. So as mentioned, the site is zoned industrial, light industrial, and there are a number of different land uses around it. To the south, east, and west are light industrial. Across to the north, the blue parcel is the community services district, that is the Lacombe Police Station. And then there is the highway commercial along the highway, and then some heavier industrial to the east. And so what's important about this application is that it is a discretionary use. And so it is something that can be allowed after due consideration is given to the impacts upon the surrounding lands, and that the use is generally acceptable, but there might be factors which may not make it compatible. And so when it's discretionary, we want to consider the surrounding context and the suitability of the site and infrastructure to support the proposed development. And so since council did pass the site exception to allow a daycare facility as a discretionary use, Today, it's MPC's responsibility to give due consideration to the safety of the children that will be on the site daily. So how can we make it compatible within the context of an industrial district? And so I will go through each of the conditions that we're recommending shortly. I did mention there is a parking variance that is required on the property. So with the existing uses on the site, including the proposed daycare, 45 parking stalls are required, and there are 42. So there is a 3-stall parking variance, which we do think is a little bit minor in nature. There is a section in the land use bylaw which allows flexibility on lease bay buildings, which this is, and that is the allowance of waiving or requiring additional parking requirements based on the occupants within the building. And so our feeling is that we can waive those 3 stalls based on the variety of uses from a restaurant, place of worship, small manufacturing, and the proposed daycare, just because they all have varying hours of operation. So the proposed daycare, we're going to see the most traffic in the mornings when kids are getting dropped off, and more traffic late afternoons when they're getting picked up, whereas the church only operates on Sundays, so that traffic wouldn't be there. And that parking necessary for the church would be available for the other uses during the week. So that is why we're supporting that 3-stall parking variance. So as I mentioned, there's a number of uses on the site. And so when you look at how the site is operating, you can assume that it's operating as a commercial strip mall rather than an industrial site. And that's just based on how it's been rented by the property owner. But we do need to take into consideration it is zoned industrial. So if any of those uses are going to cease and a new business is going to come in, it's a permitted use. And so we could end up with a permitted light industrial use next to a daycare. And that's really what we're trying to mitigate with this application and the conditions that we're recommending. And so when it comes to industrial properties, generally they do emit noise, fumes, dust, and odors within the confines of the property boundaries. And so we're trying to mitigate what those specific concerns could be in relation to children playing outdoors, because a play space is required as per the Alberta provincial government requirements for daycares. And so there are concerns that we're just not going to be able to deal with, such as fumes that is going to have to be mitigated on site daily by the daycare operator. But we do feel that we can mitigate a few of the concerns as noted. And so the first one being the outdoor play space that is proposed on the east side of the property. So that photo shows its general location within a gravel parking lot. And so one of the concerns with industrial properties is dust. And so we do recommend that the east side of the property be hard surfaced, or at least a portion of it be hard surfaced, so that dust isn't blowing into the outdoor play space. And so we've put at a minimum an area of 30 feet around the outdoor play area being hard surfaced. We felt that that was just a decent enough amount without having to do the entire site in hard surfacing, but give that buffer between the gravel and the play space. So on the screen, the lighter gray area around the play area is an approximation of what that 30 feet could potentially look like. The other item, one of the other items is that there is going to be a fence around the play area. But in this area, it is also a drive aisle and a parking area, and that's what it's been used for. And so we do want to have a little bit more protection if there are vehicles that are going to be driving around it. And then also increasing the height of the fence to be 8 feet to help hopefully alleviate any contaminants from entering the play area. And then some traffic markings around the play area, including bollards. So that if there is an incident with running into the fence, then the children are still protected. And then the last consideration is in regards to a phase 1 environmental assessment. So we did conduct a historical review of permits on the subject site, and identified that it was used for automotive service and repair and auto body and paint shop previously in previous years. And so we do feel that oftentimes these types of businesses do release hazardous substances into the environment. And it's not a gas station, which is typical for phase one environmental assessments, but there can be hazardous material through storage tanks, hydraulic lifts, floor drains, and pumps, and or oil water grit separators. And so we do think, because the children are outside in that back area, that the applicant should conduct a phase one environmental assessment to ensure there's no harmful contaminants on the property. And so we are recommending that MPC approve the application for the development permit for the discretionary use of a daycare. And there are a number of conditions recommended. And so I'm just going to point out conditions 3, 4, and 5, which are specific to what I just discussed about hard surfacing, increasing the height of the fence, and including traffic markings, and that the applicant completes a phase one environmental assessment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Planner McLaughlin. A couple of questions. Obviously, the applicant is aware of all of these already. Is that correct?
Yes, we emailed the agenda to the applicant. I specifically told them to look at the conditions because we were recommending a number of items in regards to safety of the children. So they were sent the agenda and given that information.
Any comments back from them?
No comment.
No comments back from them? Okay, because I think the environmental assessment is really important. If that site was used for automotive repairs and so on, I don't expect there's any issues there. But just for the protection of the children, like you said earlier, it's a priority for me, obviously. Member Ross.
Thank you, Chair Gullickson. I guess one concern I could foresee, I'm not sure if the current businesses are aware of the number of children and the possible traffic what would be in front of the building, if that's going to be a drop off. Is it possible to have the drop off in the back of the building so it's not going to conflict with the businesses that are currently in that location in that entire building? I think it would be more respectful and courteous if the drop off was at the rear rather than at the front of the building, if that may be in consideration for a condition.
So the applicant would likely have to reevaluate their permit plans then. So they have submitted some floor plans. So it would basically reorient the interior of the building from the entrance to having to put it into the back. So they would have to actually redo their interior renovation plan in order to accommodate that rear entrance. It's certainly something that if you wanted to do that, I would suggest the application gets tabled in order to have the applicant here to discuss that, or to discuss that with them prior to making that decision, just because it is going to change how the interior of their building is laid out.
Sorry if I may continue. I'm quite like the businesses. I'm hoping that they would realize the number of children going to be at this daycare. Would they would already know this? And with the notification of this possible approval, or were they aware of the number of possible children at the site?
They likely would not be aware because the notice goes to the landowner, not to the occupants. And so it would be up to the occupants to be asking questions of the landowner to understand what other businesses are going in there. I don't know what their communication process is like. It's not typical to notify occupants because the bylaw requires the landowner be notified. So it's likely that they're not aware.
Yeah, that's concerning. I was completely supportive as this on city council because it's a very much needed. Daycare is a draw for citizens to be part of our community, and if somebody move into our community, you got a checklist. Education, daycare, recreation facilities, and so forth. I think it's part of that checklist. But knowing the individuals of this business of this building, 100 and 50 kids, or 150 or 25. Yeah, that's 153 vehicles from, I guess, you would think most of the traffic would be before business hours of the other businesses, typically. Maybe exception of one. I don't know what time that individual starts, but yeah, I guess maybe look at it that way is most people, their own work time starts at 8, so they're gonna have to drop off their children before 8. That would be an argument for not having a stipulation, so.
And I think that the businesses that are in there currently probably wouldn't have a lot of issue with this. And there's opportunities for increased traffic and increased awareness of what's there. I mean, so I think there's, and of course the church is a non-issue. The restaurant is the one you're concerned with, right? And I suspect that the majority of the traffic wouldn't be a problem. Maybe, and in the afternoon, they're not open anyway, right? When they're picking them up. So currently, I don't think there's any issue. Potentially later on down the road, you could be right, but it might be something that would have to be looked at by the businesses themselves to say, this has become a problem and we need you to do something. Because they would have their own spots designated, would they not? They don't on that site right now.
Correct.
But they could
So if
on
the
private
spot,
property,
if the
right?
spots were going to be designated, then that would be up to the landowner to
Right.
designate the spots and to also enforce because it's private property. So
Yes.
they'd have to have their own enforcement procedures. So if it is a concern, again, the application can be tabled as well for further communication with the occupants. So it's not typical of the land use bylaw process, but in order for MPC to feel comfortable, if that's the communication wanting to go to the occupants, that can certainly be done as well as part of the process. So it can be tabled for that to occur.
How long would that delay the process?
Well, MPC is scheduled to occur again on October 18th. So the application could come back on October the 18th as well. So that would give us a week and a half. The letters could be hand delivered versus sent in the mail. So that shortens the timeline a little bit because there are only a few businesses in there. So hand delivering the letters wouldn't be completely out of the ordinary. And then having them respond basically by October 18th, I think you would potentially get some letters handed to you versus in your agenda package, but it's definitely doable.
Do you know how this compares to Tiny Tots as far as numbers go? As far as that daycare goes? No, I don't either. I know Tiny Tots has a lot of kids at it though. And I don't feel there's any problems there maybe with traffic. Are you aware of any? No, I don't. I just don't feel that traffic's going to be an issue. I think they're opposites. So, Member Lentz.
Thank you, Chair Gullickson. I think traffic is going to be a major issue over there. I work in that area, I eat in that area, and there's several times we can't get for lunch over there. There's traffic even parked on Wolf Creek Drive several times. In fact, we just about hit a vehicle crossing the ditch the other day. Getting out of one of the businesses because they couldn't get out because the amount of traffic in there was really close. There was 3 vehicles involved in that. And unfortunately, I was one of them. So I really honestly think it's a poor place for a daycare. Industrial is not a great place for it. Second one is the lot behind this particular building is up for sale. What if it becomes a body shop? What if it becomes a tank manufacturing facility? And then what do we do? At that point in time, it's over. They're permitted use and this would be discretionary use, so it becomes a problem. Parking stalls are a main, it's a main issue. 153 kids plus 26 staff, that's roughly 170, 175. Truly, I don't believe this area can handle it. There's no sidewalks in the area. There's nowhere to take the children down the road. Tiny Tots walks their kids around town. There's sidewalks everywhere. There's no bike lanes in the area. All around, there's just a poor area for a daycare. Industrial is not for daycares.
Member Ross?
Thank you, Chair Golson. This was like discussed heavily at council. Unfortunately, there was a limited number of options for the service provider for locations. There just wasn't and it was a great need in the community. If there were other locations other than this, they would have sought that location. Agreed. It was discussed upon council, great detail, that it was not the ideal location because there's not a playground within walking vicinity. There wasn't sidewalks, and that was brought up in council a lot. But on the other hand, if there was other adequate lease space available, I'm sure that the realtor would have sought other opportunities. But yeah, I do have a concern about it for the traffic going through, because it's, like I say, 150, the potential of 150 vehicles is a lot. I guess on the other hand, the lot that is for sale is the owner of this building as well. So what maybe the individual that owns this location may be limiting their options for sale of the property that's for sale. That's that individual's personal choice, because I agree. The land that's for sale to the lot to the east, it is an industrial area, but that's the owner has agreed to lease this for this purpose. And yeah, that might be limiting his options for sale, but I would prefer not to table it. You want to see the process succeed, but I foresee getting a lot of flack for traffic.
So it would be within MPC's purview to limit the number of children, or limit the number of children going to, like, that are capacity wise. So that is something that can be limited. So it would be part of the resolution with a maximum of 100 children. I don't think you'd want to limit staff, because that's regulated by the provincial government, and we don't know what the ratio is for staff to children. But it would be the same comment that I've had with the other items, to table it and have that we can have that conversation with the applicant, because it might not be viable for 100 children. And so that would be information that we would have to bring back to MPC. They could probably tell us what their viability is for capacity. So if there is a traffic problem, you can also put a condition on for a traffic impact assessment based on trip generation. So that would assess the 2 accesses and Wolf Creek Drive and see if there's any traffic improvements that can be made to mitigate traffic coming to and from the site. So that's an option as well.
So, I mean, the traffic at this site is going to be limited to morning and late afternoon, correct? Yeah, so noontime is not an issue for this location. As far as noontime is an issue for the restaurants that is there right now. So I suspect that they're probably way past their, at times, the limit on that parking lot by the restaurant even.
Right. So my experience in dealing with daycares is typically your peak traffic time is between 7 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. And then in the afternoons from about probably 3:30 until 5:30. So it's a little bit longer in the afternoons, but that's your typical peak time for daycares for pickup and drop off.
Thank you. I think it was member.
Go ahead,
Member Kent.
Thanks, Chair Goldson. So I don't think it's our role to dictate a business plan. That's just personal. I don't agree with that. But I don't believe in more red tape, more regulation. But we do have somewhat of responsibility to kind of, as I see MPC, is to consider the possible objections from neighboring businesses. And I guess I don't recall when it came to council as the potential number of the children. It was the location and the need was identified. But I'm more positive with the numbers, I guess, as the there's your business say, are they still doing breakfast before that time, right? You know, and if the flow was kind of like as a circle in one and out the other quickly without actually parking in front of the building, taking up parking spots, but yeah, that's, you know, because it is part of bringing people long-term to community is what services is available as to the families, right? So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Or Member Kent?
Thanks, Chair Gullickson. I lived by a daycare for 20 years. This last year, we lost the daycare, went elsewhere. Traffic never stops. Never stops. There's traffic there during the day. There's kids being picked up at all times. It's not really a school, it's a daycare. So parents sometimes don't work full days. There's sick children. There's all types of traffic. It's weird, but it's a come and go all times of the day. I back to the restaurant. I think they'll suffer, and I think they'll leave.
So I have a question regarding our ability. Do you have the ability to survey the businesses in the building? Can you do that as our administration?
Yes.
You can. Okay. It doesn't have to come from the owner then?
It does not have to come from the owner, so they could be considered an affected party, which they would be as occupants. So it would be within the purview to table the application for that further circulation and notification to occur.
So is there any way we could approve this based and then say based that there would be no objection from those businesses? Because you're only going to be looking at those few businesses. There's 3, I think, in there right now, is there not? And the church will have no objection, I'm sure. Yeah, 2 plus the church. Yeah, that goes out of there now, so. Yeah, there's only one that might be an issue for
It can't be a condition. You'd have to table the
have to
application
table
for
it.
it to occur. Yeah, because a condition is something that you want them to comply with from a planning perspective in order to make this discretionary use satisfactory. So,
And how much time will it take to get the notification out to the businesses? And we have to allow them how much time to, we don't meet the next meeting, do we? Because they have to have a couple of weeks, don't they?
let us just look at a calendar.
Okay,
18th, isn't it?
7. I don't think it makes it in time. That's the one next, we're into the following month.
Look at it 2 sides. The 153 vehicles creates foot traffic.
Oh, yeah, I mean, lots of,
Look,
that's.
like, hey, we're
business-
going to order breakfast before you get there.
Potential business, yeah, for them, absolutely, yeah.
Does it create foot traffic for the businesses, but it doesn't interfere in their business?
And how much breakfast do they do there? They don't know if they do any right now, so. Lunch is the big time, right?
So the letters could be hand delivered either tomorrow or Friday, and then we could leave it open for them to comment until the day before MPC actually occurs. And then that would give administration enough time, which would be the 17th of October. That would give us enough time to compile any comments that we receive to be able to hand out to you on Wednesday, October 18th.
If I may ask a question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Gullickson. Is there enough distance in the, under the red perimeter there for vehicles to go in and turn around? Like, you know what I mean? Is there enough distance? I don't know the distance, the number of meters and so
There's
forth.
quite a bit actually. So this picture isn't the greatest picture because it doesn't show the expanse of the whole east side. But basically where, is there a laser pointer on this? I don't know. Where you see that fenced area and the trailer, that's the outdoor play space will come out probably a little bit further than that to probably where that garbage can is. So there's still enough maneuverability in and behind. I don't think we might have a, do you have the full site plan? there might be a measurement on the site plan. So according to the site plan, there is 110 feet.
So perhaps a simpler question, rather than going to the businesses, would be, would the daycare be in favor of drop off at the rear of the property? Because if they were to comply as a good neighbor, so to speak, to the other businesses of that same entire building, you know, I want this business to succeed, don't get me wrong, but I just think it makes more sense to not be in front of these businesses.
It would be the same timeline because you'd still want to table the application in order for us to have that conversation with the applicant, and then we wouldn't bring it back until the next MPC meeting anyways.
But would that be a simpler process for yourselves to have that conversation with the owner? Then you wouldn't have to go to the other business owners.
That would be entirely up to MPC.
Yeah,
and
Right. No, I'm just trying to, is that a simpler process for planning and development?
to go,
To go to the developer with a suggestion?
yep.
Rather than to involve more people into the question? Like, it would just be to me, it would just make more sense to have the drop off at the back. You're not interfering with and not creating any anxiousness with surrounding neighbors. That's just.
So as I understand it, he has plans drawn already for his renovations and so on.
That's
He would have to
correct.
change those.
He would have to change his plans, and I believe he submitted his building permit as well. So
it'd
the
have to-
building
that would have
permit
to be-
drawings have already been completed as per what they were hoping to do. So it would be a conversation because they would have to flip things around. So I was just looking at the plan that they've proposed, and there's all sorts of rooms in the back, like area rooms for the different age categories. So they'd have to flip their office space from the front to the back, or at least have some type of mud room or entryway for the children and the parents to enter
Instead
through
of
the
the front
back
that is
instead
set
of the
up for
front.
it
Yeah.
now.
So
Okay.
we'd have to talk to them about that. So simpler process, maybe, but it's really dependent on what makes MPC comfortable to support this application. Either way, the timeline is going to be the same, whether we talk to the occupants or talk to the applicant about changing their plans, because we can't bring it back any sooner than
No.
the 18th.
No, that's.
So that will be dependent on what you would like to do.
Member Ross.
I feel better having better consultation. I'm like to make the motion to table this till October 18th. And yeah, I feel somewhat awful not approving it tonight, but yet I feel better if there was better consultation and better discussion that, you know, all due respect, you don't do all your engineering of all your drawings of what you're going to do for renovations until you get this process done. So as far as his design of his cost on that's my motion. Thank you.
So what are you proposing for them to do then?
I'm sorry. Motion to table to October 18th with planning of development to contact the business occupant with the scenario of client drop off, children drop off, and at the rear of the building. Is that appropriate direction, or would you like it worded any differently to be more clear? I'm open to suggestions. Yes, if you're going to do consultation, do it all. But if obviously the business sees that makes sense and they're going to accommodate it, then you don't, have that conversation first, but that's up to you.
So there's a motion on the floor. Okay, I'll just I think we need to, I think they're two different things, but that's okay. These motions on the floor now. Do you have any discussion regarding the motion, Member Kent? Don't know yet. Well, it's, we're gonna vote here right away, so you need to have some kind of or if you have any comments, now's the time, because there's nobody else. Yes, go ahead, Member Kent.
Well, the motion's better than a refusal in this case. I don't agree with, you know, daycare being an industrial. We should be looking at the kids, not necessarily at traffic. I think we're going about it the wrong way. They're the most important, but we're putting them on the back burner. So I would like to, I don't know. I just don't agree with the whole situation here. So it's tough for me to make a decision on a motion, right?
Okay, thank you for that. No other comments? Okay. And I'll have you read back the motion as it's written now. That would be great.
On the fly, I'll do
On the
my
fly,
best.
thank you.
So the motion is for tabling. So resolve that the Municipal Planning Commission table the application for a development permit for the discretionary use of a daycare facility for 2 weeks for the purpose of, number one, further consultation with the business occupants of 4013 53rd Avenue. And 2, for the applicant to provide information on whether drop-off and pickup can be accommodated at the rear of the property.
Thank you very much.
Does that work?
That's clear.
Okay.
That's good for
It
you.
works for you, it works for me.
Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Yeah, I'll go to. Okay. Those opposed, 1. All right, so we're tabled that until the 18th then. Okay, then we will move on to the summary of permits issued by the Development Officer Development Authority. And there's lots, but it's
Thank
been a
you.
long time.
It has been a
We
while.
haven't seen you forever, you guys. I don't know.
Thank you, Chair Gullickson. All right, so the first one is an accessory building, a detached garage with a 9.4 meters squared, so 14% variance to the maximum size in relation to the detached dwelling, and a 1.5 meter squared, 2% variance to the maximum parcel coverage at 44 Ironwolf Boulevard. So this site is zoned residential detached district. Variances of up to 15% can be approved by the development officer as long as there's no appeals. No appeals were received on this one, so the permit was issued on July 7th. The next one is for a Class 2 freestanding sign with a variance to the amount of freestanding signs allowed per parcel. So this site is 5628 56th Ave, zoned CS, Community Services District. Again, variances in general can be approved by the DO if there's no opposition or appeals received. So neither were received. The permit was issued on July 14th. The next one is a discretionary use occupancy for a place of worship at number 8, 4013 53rd Ave. So the site is zoned I1 Light Industrial District. The discretionary use occupancies in an established building can be approved by the DO if there's no appeals. None were received, so the development permit was issued on July 21st. The next one is a multi-attached housing development, so 4-plex, with a 0.88 meter 37% variance to the minimum side yard, a 28.45 meter squared 4% variance to the minimum landscaped area, and a variance to the DARP requirements for a hipped roof. So that is at 5135 53rd Street. The site is zoned R5, residential multi-unit dwelling district. Variances can be approved by the DO if there's no opposition or appeals. None were received. That permit was issued on July 25th. The next one is a 0.71 meter 79% side yard and a 0.45 meter 50% rear yard setback variance on an existing accessory building, which was a shed. That's at 22 Eva Crescent. It's zoned residential detached district. Variances over 15% can be approved by the DO if no opposition or appeals are received. Neither were received, so the development permit was issued on September 1st. The next one is a discretionary use occupancy for an automotive detailing business, which is a similar use to auto body and paint shop, so it could be considered as a discretionary use. That one is zoned I2 Heavy Industrial District. And again, the occupancies in an established building can be approved by the DO if there's no appeals. None were received, so that permit was issued on August 18th. Next one is a discretionary use secondary suite for 1 bedroom at 4712 Beardsley Avenue. The site is zoned R1 Residential Detached District. The discretionary use could be approved by the DO if there was no opposition or appeals. None were received. That permit was issued on September 8th. The next one is for an accessory building, a detached garage with a 0.57 meter 63% side yard setback at 5442 49th Ave. That site is zoned R4 Residential Mixed District. Variances over 15% can be approved by the DO if there's no opposition or appeals. None were received, so that permit was issued on September 22nd. The next one is a Class 2 fascia sign with a 1.15 meter 46% variance to allowable height above grade at 5830 Highway 2A, zoned CS Community Services District. The variance was over 15%. The DO could issue it if there was no opposition or appeals. None were received. That permit was issued on September 22nd. The next one is a 1.3 meter 87% side yard setback variance on an existing deck, as well as a 0.13 meter 14% side yard setback variance and a 0.65 meter 72% rear yard setback variance on an existing accessory building, a detached garage at 5611 48th Ave. So that site is zoned R1. The variance is over 15%, so no opposition or appeals were received. So the development officer was able to issue the permit on September 29th. Another one is for a 0.1 meter 11% side yard setback variance on an existing accessory building for a shed. That was at 4703 Johnson Avenue. The site is zoned R1. Variances of up to 15% can be approved by the DO if there's no appeals. None were received, so that permit was issued on September 22nd. The next one is a discretionary use for a home occupation 2, kennel and animal services, which is pet sitting. That's at 5730 44th Ave. So the discretionary uses can be approved by the development officer if there's no opposition or appeals. None were received. That permit was issued on August 25th. And the last one is a discretionary use home occupation 2 for baked goods at 30 Irma Street. Site is zoned R1. And again, no opposition or appeals were received, so the DO could issue that permit on September 15th.
Thank
You're all
you for
caught up.
that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the member Kent was saying he's building a same thing, this animal pet service, pet sitting for 125 dogs, 125. Yeah, hopefully that is not what's going here. No, like they're probably talking 3 or 4, right? Okay, good. I was a little concerned that it was going to be as big as the one he's building down in Crossfield or wherever it's going. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And I guess the next thing is our next meeting, which is October 18th, which we have an item on the agenda now, 2 now. Okay, so I will just be looking for a motion for adjournment. Member Kent.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? We're done. Yeah.